Hey, Steve. Good morning for me. Good evening your time.
Hey, good evening,
How you,
Reed.
how you doing today?
Very well, very excited to get going. Talk about
Yeah.
learning Power BI.
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking earlier, it's some interesting takeaways that you've had and kind of a collection of thoughts, best practices, and things that you've found that have been very helpful to kind of advance Power BI career, upgrade skills and everything else through training and everything. And like I'm also just coming fresh and hot off of doing that from last night. I just got back from Houston and an on-site client training. So I think this is going to be a fun discussion today for sure. And I'm looking forward to hearing on some of the things that you have to say about the topic for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We'll go through it in the presentation and the conversation, I should say, but really a lot of it's going to be opinion based and my experience, and we do Power BI full time. So a lot of people coming in fresh, a lot of people want to know how to get started with Power BI. Other
Hmm.
people have been doing it for a while and think, how do you get to the next step? So my thoughts and probably your thoughts as well
Yeah,
on how that happens and some tips and advice.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good discussion. Hopefully, people stay through as they listen to our various opinions on topics. But I think both from the audience perspective and from mine is like some of my favorite live streams on my Fridays are the times that I actually get to have a chance to have a more of a conversation. It's always fun to learn, especially on a new topic. I enjoy just as much as everybody attending these to be able to sit back and actually absorb some of the content. But uh, I usually find I learn a lot more, and I think you can get to the nuances of point counterpoint of a topic if you actually are able to have a discussion around it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just a lot of us are very focused on our own industries or our own career paths, and being able to hear from other people, no matter what level or how long you've been doing this, is always really, really cool and always helpful.
Exactly. But yeah, I think one thing that would be good to do, as I do on each of the streams, is if you want to give a brief introduction to yourself and who you are, and then from there, I think we can segue into getting started on talking about that broader conversation of improving your skills and career.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Steve Campbell. Now, I run the EMEA data analytics capability at Cognizant Microsoft Business Group. So what that really means is Cognizant Microsoft Business Group is a consultancy. Cognizant is American owned, very large global consultancy. I'm over in the UK at the moment. So we're focused mostly in Europe, and I have a team of analysts, Power BI developers and some senior developers. And we really focus on reporting, and specifically I focus in Power BI. We work with backend teams, a lot of Databricks and some Azure and stuff like that. But my focus is Power BI. And with the reporting team, a big part of my job is to help people. We have some juniors, some mid developers, and seniors, all the way through, and get people, help them train, bring them up and mentor people throughout their careers. And as a hiring manager as well, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is my experience doing that and things that I've seen and things that I think is going to be useful for people watching this who are either a new or maybe doing this a while and want to hear my opinion. Hopefully it's helpful to them. I'm also a data platform MVP. So what that really means is, just like now on Friday nights, I also spend a lot of my time talking about Power BI and data. Reed's another MVP. So I noticed Chris Wagner in the chat. So there's a few MVPs here. So hopefully we can have a really good discussion with some people who do this for a living and just love talking about data and Power BI. Fun fact as well, I've lived in UK, Australia, and USA. So I'm over in the UK now. I'm in London. I was recently in the USA. I lived there for about 9 years. I moved back here a couple of years ago. And I lived in Australia for just over a year. So a little fun fact about me there. Like to travel, like to get around. And here is my social media and my blog. Very active on LinkedIn. If you find any of this interesting, please do connect and send me a message and just say, hey, and just give me any feedback as well. I post a lot of what I'm talking about today. I actually look through my LinkedIn posts to kind of get some of this, get some help and thoughts for this presentation. So I do regularly post about training, about learning paths, about where to go to learn, and really things that I've been learning myself that week or that month. I'll post them on LinkedIn and say what I've done, what I've learned. So definitely follow me on there if you're interested and you're not completely bored by the end of the presentation.
Perfect. Yeah, and Chris is very happy about his name drop.
He's a great guy, Chris. So we used to live in
yeah.
the same town in USA, actually. So yeah, I know Chris well.
Yeah, I'll say just as one random comment on that, Chris, your around the world shots of you wearing my shirt is probably some of the most entertained I have been in a long time since I've been on Twitter for professional reasons. So kudos to that. That was really better said Kratos to that. Those were fantastic, especially the you were trying to make sure the ring wasn't dropped into Mordor. I get that, but unfortunately you fail at that attempt. Right.
Awesome. So with that introduction, let's get started then. So I want to preference this talk and just kind of say what we're going to be going over, what this is about. So as I say, I hire and train employees in Power BI. That's a large part of my job. And another part of it is to kind of overlook projects, help out in projects and help architect and come in and help people out with solutions. I also teach Power BI. I do a lot of teaching. I do in London here, a lot of teaching, talk Power BI. You know, as I said, data platform MVP. So my life kind of revolves, my professional life revolves around Power BI, and even in the evenings and weekends. So this is mostly in my opinion. I'll say this. I'm going to present some frameworks, some thoughts. This won't apply to everyone. You know, everyone learns Power BI differently, and probably a lot of people use Power BI differently. Now, myself, because I'm in consulting, and people like Reed and other people who are very specialized, we do Power BI and only Power BI. There's probably a lot of you out there where it's maybe a big part of your job, or maybe even a small part of your job. So of course, with that, there's going to be a lot of different ways and a lot of different uses for Power BI. What I'm going to talk about though, is throughout my experience, I see a lot of people coming into Power BI, especially those who come from an Excel background or a business background, kind of like this data analyst. And this is also from my own experience, what I did, skip over some what I call, you know, the important foundations and important blocks in learning Power BI. And then when you're, you know, developer, kind of getting into intermediate, maybe you as well, you haven't quite got some of these foundations, which I think is good to go back and relearn. So this is really designed for anyone, wherever stage, looking at where you are and how you want to advance. But also, if you're like myself, who has a team of Power BI employees, want to set people on training paths, or want to set yourself on your own training path, kind of offer up a somewhat generic, but a good, what I think is a good training path, and good thoughts on where to look and what to start training in. And hopefully this will help you, and hopefully maybe even if you've been doing Power BI a while, give you some good ideas to go back and look at some skills where you might not have thought of that I needed in Power BI. So before I dive in, I like to kind of say this roles. These are just kind of typical roles you see in data. We're probably going to focusing on this top right here, this business intelligence developer, Power BI developer. Again, probably there's a bunch of these different people here, maybe some data analysts, architects, you know, the data scientists and data engineers. I kind of want to say we're going to be focusing on the tool itself. So we won't necessarily be going through each of these roles and different skills. One thing I will say is a lot of these roles don't really have specific global definitions, right? So whatever your role is, if you use Power BI, kind of think of it as a tool, different ways to learn. And I think if you're kind of in one of these or maybe in a different role, this would still apply to you. And then before we get into the training paths and thoughts, there's always one that I think of, and this is really, the technical versus people skills. Now, there's normally a couple of ways, and this is quite traditional to advance, right? A lot of people go through the management route. Others, you might focus on kind of just being technical. I think with tools like Power BI and data and these type of tools and these skills, you can, if management's not your cup of tea or you don't want to go into a leadership role, there is really good ways of being very specialist. And we'll go through what I mean by specialist skills with Power BI. So to me, it's not always you need to go into management to advance. And I think that's what a lot of people's thoughts are. And that's kind of an old school way of thinking. There's a lot of jobs I think you can get where you're just looking at technical skills. You can get, paid a lot of money and have a really good living when you're really, really good. You'll need some probably people skills and all those soft skills. But one thing I like to point out, and I say to people, don't think of management as the only way forward, right? You can get a very, very good career about being very technical.
Yep, I completely agree on that. You don't always have to lead necessarily to advance. You can become a senior engineer or anything else, but you can still do rather than lead.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of MVPs and people who have dedicated a lot of time to these tools, like Reed yourself, right? Who, you can go freelance and have great careers, have your own kind of company and still be very technical. So it's a good way to go. And these tools open up those skills, I think. So I want to kind of show my lovely slide here of how I see people learning Power BI. And these are different ways I typically see people and different areas they focus in. Now you can think of each of these bars as a different skill in Power BI. So you could think of data modeling, data visualization. We'll go through this and we'll break this down into ones I think you need for Power BI. But each of these is the same value overall. So we say, maybe you have 10 points. Think of it like a role-playing game where you're designing a character, right? You have 10 skill points to spread across. You can kind of spread them any way you want. The first one I see people doing a lot is, I want to be the generalist. So typically a lot of people say, maybe I'm learning Power BI or I'm keep learning Power BI. Let's learn everything, end-to-end Power BI. This can be good, but sometimes you do spread yourself quite thin because you only have so much room for absorbing knowledge. And it's hard to learn everything at once. And this is a trap I see a lot of people. I've done this myself very, very much, right? You say, I need to learn Power BI or I need to learn a new skill. Let's learn everything about it. And it's been quite hard to go to this generalist kind of point of view. The second, I would say, is more that specialist. And maybe this is as well not always the best way where you're really focused. So maybe I love, data visualization. So I learn a little bit about Power BI, about modeling and DAX, but I really focus on visualization. This can be good and it can be quite niche. However, my advice is don't try and be specialist until you've really, advanced quite far in your career with Power BI. I would say definitely become more of a generalist first, have all those base skills, and we'll go through kind of what base skills are. Then you can start looking at a specialist. But to me, this is, maybe a couple of years into your career of learning, really using Power BI. I think going too hard into one specific subject too quick often set you back because you might miss out on some of the core fundamental skills.
And I think you also miss out on maybe knowing what you're gonna like to do. I actually like that description, but like I immediately thought of like the analogy of maybe a chef or something. Like most people just normally don't immediately start their journey out the gate like becoming a specialist, especially with like steaks or something else. That you generally become a general cook, and then you figure out, oh, I actually really like to make X dish after trying like 30 different things, and then you specialize in that. Like I started as a general PBI specialist. I still am to a degree, but I focused on visualization after I found using Power BI that is something I really enjoyed as like one particular component.
Yeah, I think I love that analogy of being a cook, right? And then
Yeah,
coming up, yeah, exactly. You become a line cook, and you can become a cook, and you can become a chef, and you really
yep,
need to go through those progressions before you can find your niche. And yeah, as you say, yeah, a lot of stuff you think you like at the beginning, you might get a taste of something else and then switch. I mean, that's happened to me a few times. I started off being DAX focused, but now I think I've become more admin and governance. So there's a lot of different stuff that's out there.
exactly.
One of my favorite is kind of this rounded, and I think this is similar to a specialist, but a little more evened out. So you might have one or two areas you're focused in and you really like, but you still have core skills across everything. Some areas you have a bit stronger, and one area you're quite strong. You don't necessarily have to be the best in the world, the specialist, but you are strong. Of course, you can be a specialist. There are the people out there, if you think of SQL BI, think of DAX and Tabular, right? They're really specialist. But it does difficult, and they didn't start out just doing this. They've been in the game for 30 years, right? So really, I would recommend, in my advice, start being rounded, and more as you go and more advanced you get, make sure you get all those skills, bring it up, and then you can start focusing. And I think that too specialized in the bottom right, we kind of talked about, right? Where you put all your effort into one or two ideas, really do miss out, and you won't understand the rest of Power BI, and you might know how to do a great visual, but you might not know what the licenses are. It's
Yep.
you need to spread out these skills a bit. Okay, so I'm going to say this. There's a lot of, as I said, the roles. There's data engineering, and there's all these other roles which probably help you be really good at your job. This presentation is going to really focus on learning Power BI. So what we talk probably isn't the only thing you'll learn, and this won't, unless you're a Power BI only consultant specialist. Most people probably have other skills they want to learn on top of this. But, as I said at the beginning, we're going to really focus just on learning Power BI, because this is a Power BI presentation, a Power BI discussion. So what I kind of break this down is first of all, we have the Power BI skills, I call them. And I'm going to break it down into these sessions or these different topics. Looking at Power BI desktop. This is the first one, right? How to pretty much create reports. And this is what most people think about when they talk about Power BI, making those visuals, formatting stuff, laying it out lovely. You also have the data modeling side. This is normally in Power Query, and then make your models. This is really, really important. And this is often one that, if you've come from a business side, is probably a bit newer to you as well. Of course, you have the Power Query and the DAX. These are languages. This is, Power BI, Power Queries do a lot through the UI, but it still has a language. So these are the two languages. Put service here. This really means kind of governance as well. So obviously the other side of it, once you've done your report, how do you share it? How do you admin? How do you secure it? This sort of stuff. So I go through and we've color coded these kind of, I would talk about the fundamental skills, I call them, and these are really the ones I think you need fundamentals in everything. Know the basics of it. Then you've got the core skills. Core skills are the ones where I think this is what makes you a good developer. Once you have these core skills, you've got a good grasp of it. Then you have the advanced skills, and this is kind of where you get into that more specialist. Maybe, you know, you're more of a senior advanced level. To me, though, as well, and this is something a lot of people miss out on, you focus on the tool, you focus on learning Power BI. But each of these skills, I think, has another side, and this is the theory. And these theory skills, I like to call them, are not necessarily ones that you're going to be using day to day, or isn't something you can do. It's not, you can't, you know, it's not a tool, it's not a language, but it's really understanding the theory behind it. So visual design, right? You might know how to use Power BI and put visuals on a page. Do you understand how the humans perceive data? Do you understand how to lay your page out so it's easily read? You might know how to do some data modeling in Power BI and make relationships, but do you understand databases theory? Do you understand why keys and stuff like this is displayed to you, and how things are going to come in, and what DBA is doing, why the data is in that format? And we'll go through these in more detail as well. So I think these two, people often miss out on their theory. I'm very, very focused because I want to build, which is great, but go back and learn the theory as well.
And I think that's also fundamental just for even for training. Like, it's, you know, I go through the boring stuff that I just did a couple of days ago. It's like, you know, I'm going to tell you how the data needs to look in Power BI, but we're also I'm going to tell you the reason why. Why do we have a star schema? Why don't I import a Franken table? You know, think all of those like 1,000 conversations to happen, but it goes to that idea of theory. Like, you should know why something is being done. Like, yes, there is best practice. Why is that a best practice though? And I think that
exactly
helps you to find other patterns, and you're not just parodying something, you actually have an understanding of it.
Yeah, exactly, precisely right. And Reed, as someone who trains, right, you're very aware of this as well. Then I like to say the other skills. We're not going to be focusing too much on this, but I think I did a LinkedIn post on this the other day, right? A bit of SQL. I always, and one of the things I tell all my Power BI developers, go learn some SQL. And, you know, go learn some SQL is a couple of weeks, get some basics. SQL is one specific language, but I think SQL's king, in my opinion. It's not going away. Understanding some of these other languages, and these are skills which might not be directly applicable in Power BI. And I know I said we're focused on Power BI, but there are ones around there that you need to learn, I think, to be a really advanced Power BI developer. And this is where a lot of people learn, you know, the far left, the Power BI skills. Without this theory and a couple of these other skills, that's what's stopping people getting to the next level. And I think this is where people get stuck and find it difficult to advance. And I do see a lot of the comments. I think we'll cover a lot of them. So we'll go through and we'll come back to some of the questions.
Exactly. And like for Jack, just as a quick mention of yours, I think that's something, if it's not addressed by the time we get to the end as well, I think that will be a great general Q&A question at the end to talk about like steps to becoming independent, which have some overlaps, but also separate conversations from specific Power BI skills too.
Yes, definitely. You've got a good few people here in the audience as well that could definitely talk about this. And my final one is optimizations. To me, once you have these first three building blocks, optimizations is the one where, and I actually talk about this in my interview questions. So when I'm interviewing for senior or you know, even high-level developers, I ask mostly about optimizations. How do you optimize things? So I think once you have the basics, the core skills and some of the advanced skills, how would you make it running better? How would you make it run cheaper? How would you make it run faster? To me, these are those top level skills which kind of can make you specialist and get through really, really well. And then I love to put this at the top, best practices. I'll go through a bit about what best practices are, but always come to best practices. I'm becoming a very, very best practice, you know, pure star schemas where possible. My pages are very, very clean. I don't like doing hacky stuff, right? It's good to learn a lot of this, but always follow best practices where you can. It will help you so much in the long run. I'll say that. A lot of reasons why reports stop working or get difficult is because we've tried to do things which are just too intricate and not really following how Power BI works.
The
So
one
best
pushback I'll say
practices.
is you didn't even say star schema, you said pure star schemas. And I will say that almost like in the real world, you will never have a pure star schema. Like if you're a teeny tiny little, like you have one location, one office, and 5 employees, there's a decent chance you might have like a nice clean fact and dimension table and you have 5 tables in your model. But by the time you're a company of any size, I have almost never actually built a perfect star schema. You can aim towards it for sure, but that's just one of those that I tell, like, I say first and foremost with most of my training, like everything that I'm telling you, like you just said, best practices. These are things to aim towards. You get close to it, but it's never going to be perfect. You're going to have a many-to-many relationship somewhere that just has to be done based off the data or this or that, or some exception to a rule that will eventually be added to your report, to your model, or anything else. But you hopefully try to get it as close to it as you can with diminishing returns. Like, can you make it 1% better with 30% or 30 more hours? Or can it be like 1% less, but also saving 30 hours of time? Like where's the value add with some of these things?
I think that's an excellent point. And I see a couple of questions. How do I know what best practice is? And then what is perfect, right? And these are all valid points. And this is why, these are here, this type of stuff. There isn't a rule book. There isn't a book which just says, in your specific situation, this is how you should design a perfect model. To Reed's point, exactly right. It's all about understanding the situation you're in. You know what the best practice should be. You're always going to have trade-offs because, yes, I've never built a perfect star schema either. Perfect star schema, one fact with n-to-1 dimension tables. There will be things you have to do, and that might be a best practice to have a bit of snowflakes or even not just star schema, but using DAX and different things in visual design. Knowing when and what to use is exactly kind of where this point is, right? And a lot of this, I'm not going to exactly say how to learn all of this, right? This is more of what to learn. And it's more to help people go in and know what path to go on, because there's so many different training options out there. And it really depends on who you are, what access to resources you have, what language you speak. So it's very difficult to offer a universal training to everyone.
Yep.
But, this is kind of what a lot of this, you can just Google this and look, and follow me on LinkedIn as well. I post this. So knowing when and what to use, and it comes with experience. It comes with getting things wrong. A lot of time, you get it wrong and it's not very good, and then for next time, which is why a lot of people put so much value on experience.
I wanted to just throw this comment up just briefly. It's a question and an answer. How do you know what best practices are listening to these types of individuals? I just wanted to run off of that and mention as well that as you're getting started with a lot of this stuff, best practice come externally. They are coming from videos like this, articles, blogs. Eventually, you start doing things enough that you start to notice your own patterns. You not only internalize best practices that other people have passed on to you, that you now understand and can then articulate to other people, but then you might even start coming up with your own best practices for certain things. Like the example for me is I don't really think I've seen that many people talk about hiding the visual level filters in the filters pane. That's something that's not talked about commonly, but knowing how I build reports and everything, that I trumpet that now as a best practice. But eventually you start building that confidence enough to mix a bit of what I've heard from others with what I've found to be my own best practices. And as long as you always preface it with the fact that this is advice, I'm not telling you to do this, I'm recommending this. I think it's a lot easier to also continue to share that with individuals, because it doesn't feel like you're force feeding them information as offering like gentle advice to them.
Exactly. And to follow up to that point, right, I just see a comment. Should you always trying to minimize Snowflake schema and aim for star schema by merging tables?
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah. And I think a good thing is, though, that's not always possible, right? And you will hear every consultant, it's a joke in the consultant world, which says it depends. Because to me, best practices isn't here's a list of things you should do. Here's a list of things you should do in a very generic case.
Yep.
But best practices comes from experience and knowing different ways of doing stuff, because every question is unique. And what best practice for this use case will be very different for best practice this use case. So you can learn these generic best practices, try and apply them as much as you can to your situation. And eventually, as Reid said, you'll learn your own and build your own best practices. And it'll be best practice for the situation. The situation is always going to be new. So knowing which one to apply is a thing, and it kind of builds into this this one here, right? Learn both skills and theory.
Yep.
Again, learn the technical skills, learn how to do this technically, be a great person at using Power BI. Again, make sure to focus on all fundamentals across the stack before advancing too quickly, specializing. But then learn the corresponding theory. That theory is what's going to build you those best practices as well. And the example here is you might not be a DBA. You might not need to know how databases are designed. But if you understand things like keys, and we'll go into this a bit, slowly changing dimensions, this is going to help you build and build your models. So learn that theory around why data looks like it is, or why we do stuff that we do. And again, optimizing expert skill once you advance knowledge of the area. So for me, as I say, being that expert is really being optimized. But again, build up to that, right? Build up all your skills across. Maybe you can go quicker in that one area, but make sure you have a good balance. See a lot of questions coming in, and we'll get through.
Yeah, and I queued a few of them up for like broader topics. We'll definitely get to those, but more
I think
at the
we'll
end
cover a lot
for like focuses on this. Yeah, and exactly, and some of these naturally come up, I think, through your topics.
And then best practices we talked. What I always say is learn how to do hack things in Power BI by trying to extend it as far as possible. I learned Power BI by trying to build a point and click game. So if you've seen, point and click games where you have to pick items up and go from room to room, I built one of those. Not at all what Power BI is designed for. You can follow any best practices in terms of using Power BI, but I really learned how to bend the tool, how to make it do what I wanted. Learn how to do the right things and use it in the most efficient way is best practices, right? And then in practice, follow the best practices. So what I mean those 2 points is when I go and do work and for my job and for clients, I follow best practices. I try and build star schemas simple as much as I can. When I was learning though, I learn all the different ways, because this really gives me the power of learning the tool by hacking things, by trying to do things it's not meant to use for. But then when I do it for a client, I have this knowledge now. I know the extent and I know what it takes to use Power BI. But then you go and do it, and now you can apply those best practices. So, the point here being, feel free to go and do crazy stuff and learn stuff by really crazy things. But then when you come to do it for real, for projects, for clients, for your work, then you follow the best practices. One thing I always tell my employees as well is, on top of learning these core skills, start learning a niche to set you apart. It's always good to have something that kind of makes you a bit more than just a Power BI developer. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some ideas which I say to people. It could be embedded, it could be Databricks, custom visuals, Deneb, this kind of stuff. I'll probably get that base going of those fundamentals and those core skills. But these are really, really good. And as a hiring manager, if I saw someone had those skills on one of these, right, this might be a really good thing to kind of set you apart. So I see someone say, definitely do not use report server, they had some bad experience.
Yeah.
So here it is. If I was to learn Power BI from now, this would be my recommended journey from kind of beginner to developer. And even if now I am a developer and maybe an intermediate, I would go back and go through this to make sure I knew all of these. And these are kind of color coded. So red, we'll go through ones, is that kind of foundation level. The blues are that next level, and the greens kind of that more optimization. So again, just want to preference this. This is my opinion, and this is what I would do for someone on my team. For a consultant who's coming into my team, this may be very different to you. You may disagree, and that's fine, and definitely disagree with me. But if today someone asked me and said, give me a learning path, this is the one I would draw. We'll go through these as well.
Excellent.
So the first one I would kind of learn is Power BI Desktop, the fundamentals. And I think most people probably agree with that. So, learn how to open Power BI Desktop and start building stuff. I think that's quite an obvious one. Learn the tool, learn what the buttons do, learn where the tabs are, all of this sort of stuff. The next one I would do is visual design. This is just the fundamentals of this, and this might be a bit of a controversial one, but typically when a lot of people start with Power BI, you want to learn how to make graphs and stuff. So I'd say open Power BI, get the they have a built-in data, which is a flat table, learn how to do some graphs, learn how to lay out some graphs and make things look a bit nice. The reason I'll put this second is because I think once you have the foundation of desktop, the tool itself, and the foundation, a bit of that theory of learning visual design, then you can actually make some nice looking graphs. You probably won't be ready to go and do some good reporting because you won't know the back end that well, but it's going to really help you and get that kind of motivation, because it's that 5 minutes to wow, right? I can open Power BI, learn pretty quick and make something that looks nice. That's a really good, and if you're a hiring manager or if you're new to learning this, it's a really good boost, and I think it helps people carry on. Next is the fundamentals of Power Query. So this is just the UI really, and now you're starting to learn how to import data, maybe just clean it up a little, maybe you're just putting in some Excel sheets, get that into. Obviously this is quite important because you want to get data in. So I think Power Query is going to be a key one to learn pretty early, at least the fundamentals.
I think that's honestly of all the components of Power BI, just because it's almost entirely like WYSIWYG UI driven. I think a good instructor can teach most of what anyone would ever need to do in Power Query within a day. Like just because it's mouse clicks. Like as long as you just know connected data, that's 1% of your effort. How and where to transform, and just basically like there's only so many patterns of what the data needs to do, because either way 500 sources that your data can come from, it still has to be the same shape that it needs to go into Power BI. The output is universal to go in to Power BI from wherever it comes from, and once you know how it needs to look, and like just the buttons to click to basically get that data, for the most part, outside of optimization to make it a little bit faster and query folding, the basic mechanics of it are nowhere near as hard to learn as like DAX and other stuff, which is a lot more time and effort to learning a language, so to speak. You don't have to learn M to use Power Query.
Yeah, great point. And as you said, a day or maybe a couple of days you spend on it, that can save you hours of what you were doing manually in Excel. And that's typically those people's big turning point when you start learning it. And people love Power Query. So yeah, just a little bit of time. Next one, I say data modeling. Again, now you have some data, learn the basics of star schema, right? Learn what a couple of keys are, learn how to make relationships between tables, and then a bit of DAX. And we'll go through this in a bit more detail afterwards. But, learn a bit of DAX, learn how to write some simple DAX calculations. You don't have to learn the details of DAX. Save that for a bit later, but at least learn how to do stuff so you can start visualizing stuff. So we go, kind of my initial focus, right? And you can see here, we've got quite a nice even spread. We're looking across, not going to specialize. You'll notice I have an other column over here. These are ones where it's not really related to Power BI, so it's not in my graph, but I wanted to put it over here because I think they're very important to learn, and these are going to be some skills which I think you need to be a Power BI developer, but they're not related directly into Power BI. So my next kind of wave, once I've done that, would be now we're looking at a bit more theory, right? Learn database theory. And I'll go through what I think are the key terms you need to learn, but mostly things like keys and dimension and fact tables, stuff like that. My next one then would be get a bit better at Power BI Desktop. Maybe learn how to do some bookmarks, learn how to learn how to do some buttons, stuff like that. Spice up your report a little, because again, I think that really helps people keep learning, because learning theory can get a bit boring. So learning some of this really gives you some motivation. Again, learn a bit of SQL now, right? So it's in my kind of second wave, right in the middle. You can spend a week or 2 weeks just doing some SQL courses, maybe in a few days, and you can learn the basics. Once you spend a little bit of time in it, it's quite easy to learn the basics of it, I'd say that. And it will really help you think about data and see why and how data is stored. Mm-hmm. My next one then is data modeling again. And now this is getting to the next stage of data modeling. I always tell my people who are coming in and to focus on data modeling. And this is whether you're a beginner, kind of an intermediate, going to advanced. Get your data modeling really good first, or at least quite good first, before you start specializing in visualizations or cool stuff or DAX or anything like that. Because I think data modeling, to me, building a good data model, is the underpin and the key of having good Power BI reports. If you can't get your data modeling right, it doesn't matter how good you are at everything else. Your report's probably either going to have wrong data or fall apart or not be performant. This, to me, is the one skill which I see people, especially coming from business world, be the weakest on and not put enough time in. And lastly here, I'll now start thinking about governance. So looking at how to deploy reports and how to share, how to do all the stuff in the service. So here we have, this is kind of now how it looks like. So I put these, you can see database. Okay.
Look at that little
database theory and
got.
SQL. Yeah. You can see my database and SQL, right? I see these kind of going into other skills because they're not key Power BI skills, but here we have. You can see here we're still quite rounded, right? We're still quite flat, not getting too specialist too quick. And then my last one would be then, I'd start off with looking at tabular models. And I put this into green, integrating into more of their kind of core advanced skills. This is looking at, and we'll go through what this means, but looking at more, data modeling. Then I'll look at visual design again, get better at that. DAX, again, this is kind of leveling this out. And lastly, I'll look at, Power BI Desktop. Again, I think it's really key to have a really good understanding. Data modeling and Power BI Desktop, right, are my two key skills, which I think are the most important in my view for getting a nice rounded base, because you have to really understand the tool, of course, because it's what Power BI is, but you also have to build good models. And then I put data architecture here, learning kind of where your data is, and this is really dependent on what organization. For me, I tell everyone, go do a Azure 101 course. Learn the basics of Azure, because we do a lot in Azure, maybe a bit of Databricks. Depends what your organization uses, but learn stuff outside of where you get the data, so you understand the pipelines and how your data is coming in. We're going to build like this. So for me, just to kind of tidy this up, if I was to learn Power BI from now, and I was starting as a beginner and kind of getting to a level where I think I'll be comfortable to go and build reports, this is what it would look like for me. And again, this is very my opinion, but this is the path that I put people on, and people who are coming in and ask me, do you have a training path? This is what I do, and this is what I recommend. The skills for me to be a nice balanced Power BI developer.
Yeah. I think the highest one's modeling, other desktop, design, power, and is it would you consider this to be the rank of the quality of skill, like 0 to 10, or the effort that should be put into these?
I mean, I think those could probably be related, right? So it could be
Well, I
either,
would say
I guess.
it's easier to get to like expert level in Power Query in a lot less time than it would be, say, an expert in DAX, like as one comparison.
True, yeah, and you see me with Power Query is a bit lower for me. And again, it depends on your organization. I think getting better at data modeling and using the desktop for me and what I see mostly is a better way to start, and it's a more universal skill.
True.
Not all companies use Power Query as well, and that's also why I have it a little lower. But this might be different. So you might have a really big need in your company to use Power Query. So for you, again, it might be a bit higher. Again, I can only generalize because we have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. So to generalize again, this is what I'd say. And of course, the reason other is quite high is because it's a combination of all these other skills.
SQL.
SQL and theories and stuff like that. So maybe other can live in its own, but the point being, you need to focus a bit more on these as well, right? You can't just focus on the Power BI skills. You do need to get these surrounding skills. And just to clarify, you said some companies don't use Power Query. What do they use instead? For example, in consulting, we have a lot of Databricks, so we do everything kind of in the back end. Obviously, you'll use Power Query to get data in, but we might not do any modeling or transformations in Power Query.
Some people use, I confuse the two. It's there because there's two companies with very similar names. There's Alteryx and Acteryx. Acteryx, I think, is the FP&A more type stuff and budgeting. Alteryx is the data transformation platform, right? That's similar to Power Query.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a ADF, Data Factory. Got a good one. Power Query equals last minute ETL. Yes, ETL. And Matthew Roche's maximum of transformation. Look that up, and he says do all your transformations as upstream as possible, but as downstream as necessary. So if you can do stuff before Power Query, right, back before that, that's better. However, a lot of people, especially people who are Power BI developers, you don't have access to these tools. So again, this is opinion based. This is not true for everyone. I can only generalize and see what my skills would be if I was learning or if I was telling someone. This may look a little different to you. I think look at the general patterns though, right? Don't specialize too quickly in one area. Focus on data modeling, whoever you are, and focus on Power BI desktop. And also think of other skills such as that SQL and those theories that you need and people often skip out on. So I'm just going to go through these next quite quickly. Again, you can see the slides available if you want to go in detail. But I'm going to go through each one and just kind of give a little breakdown of the skills. I talk through them quite a bit. But these are not complete and not exhaustive, so there's probably more, but these are kind of the stuff I would focus on, right? So looking through this top line, initially Power BI desktop, think about creating and formatting visuals, obviously understand the tabs and panes, get a really good feel on what all the stuff is. They add stuff, there's things hidden away. So understanding, courses like this to learn Power BI desktop, Microsoft Learn have some really good ones. You can take some basic, PL300 type courses, stuff like that. A lot of different courses out there you can probably do for free. If you open Power BI desktop and go to the help tab, they also have some explanations. Visual design theory, then understanding picking the right visuals, kind of understanding context, and focusing attention, color theory, storytelling with data. You could probably just Google each of these and you'll find something on YouTube or something like that. You might find a course. There's probably courses which cover this, but just understand this basic, I think, to me, would get you quite good in knowing how to design.
So there's one thing on this that unfortunately hasn't been updated in a few years. Marco, if you're happen to be watching this later, it would be great if that visuals reference gets updated at some point. But like that's what I used to like to point people to. It's they have a SQL BI has a PDF that kind of has the journey of the data. So changes over time, comparison, parts to whole, single value card, and then they have a kind of a list of native and custom visuals broken down into should use, should not use categories. So it's kind of a nice cheat sheet to help you have a flow chart of like story I want to tell with my data, things in Power BI I can choose with. There's also just broader, like for any visualization tool, picking the right visual overall, but that's a Power BI specific one that I did really like. But I think the last time it was updated was like 2018. So it will still cover most of the native visuals because they haven't really had that many new ones added, but it's not as complete as it used to be. So I am hoping that it's updated because that was, I think, the most exhaustive list at the time of any way to pick for Power BI specifically.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up because that is a fantastic one, and yeah, I still send people to it even though it is 4 years old now. But yeah, that's exactly what you want.
There you go. There.
Power Query, right? This is the basic, the fundamentals, right? Just how to import data, how to use the UI, maybe do a little bit of basic cleaning, adding some columns. Pivot, unpivoting, transpose. You might argue that these are a bit more advanced, but really powerful and clicks of buttons. So I would spend some time just learning how to use them because it's all UI this. And then merging queries is quite an important one if you need to do some transformations. Again, not exhaustive, so there's more stuff you might want to learn and use, but to me this is quite a good kind of overview. And then the practical, look at that data modeling, right? Understand what each of these mean, and I think you'll be in a good state. Know the data modeling tab, know the buttons, know where everything is, of course. Understand these words: relationship cardinality. Mm-hmm. Google relationship cardinality, Power BI. Google filter propagation, Power BI. You'll get some YouTube videos. You can learn in a few days. And again, bidirectional many-to-many, this responds to relationships and then ambiguity. SQL BI, you'll probably see a lot of theirs. We're going to mention them a lot in data modeling. They have a lot of free videos out there on YouTube, which will explain a lot of this. And then Roche's Maxim, I said this earlier, he's got a good article, and then understand, when to do your data modeling and when to do Power Query and when to do it prior. And then DAX, again, this is just that first level, so that fundamentals, right? Understand the measures column tables, understand your basic functions such as aggregating, counting, or logic. Then I would say understand filters and calculate, and then understand context, which is a really, really key thing. Again, SQL BI will be great, and there's lots of other videos out there, some really good explanations. If you can get kind of these 4 bullet points, I think you have a really good fundamentals of DAX, where you'll be able to start writing some measures and be able to do some sums and aggregations.
My one takeaway for that is at least the because context, and even the term context transition, that's something that I sometimes do or don't even mention that as a term depending on my gauge of the room's level. I still might explain it without necessarily using that specific technical term, but like just having a basic understanding of how to use an X function. I think that's one of the best examples of you create your own row to basically pre-calculate level A, calculate level B. But by the time you can understand a basic mechanic of that, I think the rest of that is you're now just upgrading your core set of skills. But it's just a couple of patterns. Knowing iterators and time intelligence, I think, are the 2 biggest takeaways that I teach in my training. Like outside of just like bike, total sales for bikes or some just really basic calculate filter. Those are those 2 family of functions that I teach in DAX that I think the rest of it will it starts to click if you understand those at a fundamental level of how the calculation works to give you those two types of measures.
Yeah, exactly. I think you nailed it there, right? Just those fundamentals. A lot of the time, a lot of people, this is 98% of what you need for DAX.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can do the rest well, then this is kind of, you're almost there. So my next level, again, going through my theory, database design. I always say to people, be able to explain each of these terms. So my, star schema, go to Power BI, Google the Power BI docs, and they have a great article on star schema. Read that, it's awesome, right? The rest of these you can probably just Google and you'll get some really good resources. These are nothing new. They've been around for years and years, and there's so much free articles out there. Again, different keys. I tell people, be able to learn this. And this is something where I see people don't always have this skill. Even intermediate and level Power BI developers who probably came from a business point of view. This is something I didn't learn probably until a bit later than I should have as well. Primary, surrogate, foreign, natural keys, right? Understand different types of keys. Understand dimension tables. So I say slowly changing dimensions. I just focus on type 0 to 3. Role-playing dimensions, junk dimensions, degenerate dimensions. If these don't mean anything to you, just Google each one. I say to people, be able to explain what each of these ones are, and you'll be in a really good point. Different types of facts, and then kind of granularity, right? Granularity is a really important concept. A lot of people skip over granularity, is kind of how granular each table is. This is where I see a lot of people have issues with Power BI modeling, get away from that star scheme and start making mistakes. So being able to explain the granularity of each table and really know what that means. See, Campbell did a great video on that. Yeah, Campbell is great. So a lot of really good and definitely check that one out. And then going back again, this is kind of that next level Power BI desktop. Then I tell people, look at that conditional format. Look at these extra things, bookmarks, tooltips, drills. This is kind of my second level. Once you get a good base of Power BI desktop, this is what makes your reports really stand out and really look cool. I see a comment, how to deal with different granularities is one of my biggest challenges to overcome. Same, 100%, is lots of people, and a lot of people don't realize that. So just knowing that is really good. Again, SQL, just kind of some basic, I mean, this isn't cover all of it, but kind of know how to do this kind of sort of stuff. I'm not going to spend a lot on this because SQL has an unbelievable amount of resources out there, loads of great ones. Microsoft do some good training. There's lots of where you can practice all for free. So basics of SQL, know how to query some data, spend a week on it, and you should just understand a bit. Data modeling, then kind of getting to that next stage, handling different options. I haven't put too much in here, and it depends on what data you're working with. Know how to handle different types of data as well, right? Because financial data has different modeling options than transactional and sales data. So knowing how to handle different types of data modeling, looking at header detail tables, date time, for example, and then learn about security RLS, right? Do a bit of a deep dive into that, learn how those rules are applied and how to secure your data. And this is a data modeling issue because you really have to understand how your data model works to apply your security so that you don't accidentally do something that lets data leak or show data that you shouldn't be showing.
Agreed.
Governance, I say this is the key ones, right? Learn licensing, really important. You should, if someone asks you, how do you license this? I mean, there's tons of different licensing in Power BI, so learn it all. Again, workspace management, how to share, how to secure it, adoption framework, gateways and refreshers, kind of basic things on a service, and how to understand how to share your report really and make sure it's shared with the right people. And then the last line, tabular models. Again, really understand the differences between the imports and direct query and live. Just a deep dive on that, kind of your different data types. Now looking at things like partitions and refreshes, incremental refresh, and then security models, again, another more deep into that RLS, learn how security applies with each other. This is maybe where you even start learning things like tabular editor, those type of tools. Visual design, again, looking at layouts. I put a couple of golden ratio, Gestalt principles, some of this theory, again, on how we understand and how we perceive data. I put requirement gathering here. Arguably, it could go into its own topic, but I like to put it in visual design because I think it's very related. This is such a key element on how to gather good requirements so you understand what you should be designing. Oops. Oh,
Drop in a couple links about golden ratios. Like it works for websites,
Excellent.
it works for reports. Like
Yeah,
it's a really cool thing in nature. But that also just it to a degree
Yeah.
it also it's the Z pattern that we that most of us read in as well too. So it somewhat follows that kind of left to right, top down, kind of spiraling inwards for looking at information.
Lots of different ones as well. You don't necessarily have to do golden ratio or something like that, but it's a good way to start, and you might find another tool that helps you out, like the Z pattern, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
My DAX now to the next level of DAX, right? Learn these 4 things. This actually came from a SQL BI article, but if you can master these 4, at least understand them basically, then you have a really good concept on DAX. And I think that's kind of as far as most people even need to go in DAX. So
Great.
These are four again, more theoretical, but will get you really, really far, understand and help dive into DAX. Then maybe looking at the advanced Power BI desktop, looking at advanced analytics, optimizing the pages, performance analyzer, see how to make things quicker, cleaning reports. And what I mean by this, it's a really nice, do your naming conventions, do groupings, do all of this kind of stuff to make the reports easy to use. And I always say a report, if it's well designed, somebody else should be able to open your report and make edits and understand how things interact. Is the documentation, is everything named correctly? So I think that's really important, because if you leave the company, someone else is going to have to maintain this report. Data architecture, these are just examples because it really depends on your company. But for my company, I say do an intro into Azure and into Databricks, because these are the services we use. This could be different depending on who you are. So whatever architecture your company learns, learn it around, from just what you're doing. And then Power Query, looking at their profiling data, error handling, and then kind of some more of the advanced parameters and functions. Again, maybe a bit of M you start learning now, but you don't need a lot of it. But parameters and functions, if you do want to learn advanced Power Query, is probably a really, really powerful tool. These are really, really powerful things. Skip that. And then these are my descriptions of a developer level Power BI. So kind of going through that from what we've just learned. To me, how I do describe my Power BI engineers at a developer level, they should have an understanding of Power BI desktop and the service, retrieving data, modeling, DAX, visuals, and reports. In addition, again, they should consider data storage, being that database theory, databases and some SQL. So you see this real focus on the data modeling and the data. Now, understanding of the Azure platform, I put that in brackets because it could be whatever you use and how the data flows through it. Sorry, I keep going backwards instead of forwards. And then senior developer level. To me, a senior developer, kind of the next stage, they have all those skills we just described, advanced knowledge of, deep knowledge in governance, security, and adoption. And I think there's a really good adoption framework out by Mr. Coates. So these are kind of those skills where you start specializing in something and being able to explain how to roll out a Power BI. Best practices, again, best practices for me, senior developers should know those best practices, and those best practices are really experience on how to try and do things really, really well. Looking at how to start optimizing, right? Optimizing models and DAX, especially large data sets. So as I said, the optimization is really that next step of Power BI to me. Knowledge of third-party tools, knowing how to use them, knowing how to do other tools, knowing how to optimize stuff.
And so that actually, I think, leads a little bit to the pop up on the screen. There you go. So advice on like getting into Power Automate and Power Apps, considering those are, and to a degree, other tools and software related to the Power Platform ecosystem.
Power Automate and Power Apps is an interesting one because even in Microsoft, Power BI sits in the data platform, whereas Power Apps and Power Automate sit in the business applications. I'll be honest, I think they're really good tools to learn. I've struggled to find good use cases to use them in a together in a real life scenario. There is some.
I think part of it is clients find you if you are like, it's almost like a horse and cart scenario. If you get better at it, you'll probably find clients who need it. If you start to advertise it, clients who need it will find you. But I agree, it's useful, but it's also like the amount of people who need Power BI is this. The amount of people who need Power Apps is that. Flow is a bit more universal. Everybody needs to automate stuff, but Power Apps are more field-based things for the most part, and not nearly as many companies do field work. People out with a cell phone needing to like enter, review, and interact with data, right?
And it might be one of those specialist skills where I'm definitely not saying don't do it. And I think you have a good point there, Reid, right? If you are a specialist in it, then people will probably find you, and it does become a good skill. But again, make sure you get quite high up in all things Power BI, I would say, before diving into that.
Exactly.
I think finally, again, this is learning iteratively. As I said, to me, I go through, think of the fundamentals, then the core skill, and the advanced. I like to think of this evenly across kind of each of the topics. One thing I do say is once you start getting to the advanced, go back and relearn those fundamentals, because you'll come and you'll have a new thought how to apply these fundamentals, stuff like the database theory. And then all of these, always think about the theory, the other side of it, you're learning the hard skills, think of that theory that goes along with it and the best practices. And then finally, the optimizing layer is really where you get key and advanced. I think that wraps up the presentation there. The last thing I did want to show is a little thing I've been working on, and this is available on my GitHub, and Reid can probably post the GitHub link now. But this is version 0.1, I'll say that. And it's probably going to go through a couple of updates. But you can see here, I have the fundamentals, right? The core skills and the advanced. I'm going to start putting in those best practices and optimizations as I add. This is probably going to change the layout a little, but those are coming. And the idea is it's an interactive kind of walking path where you can go and choose whichever route you want. So we have the left here is very much the theory based over here, and the right is very much those skills. So it's meant to be, this will add to it, and again it's quite general, so it's not going to cover everything, and you don't necessarily have to learn everything on it. But the idea is you can start walking and say, okay, I want to do the fundamentals of databases. These are the skills that I will learn, and then kind of get the fundamentals, and then choose your own path in which way you want to go through. So again, version 0.1 is going to change. Yeah. If you have any comments and updates, please let me know, and it will update and just evolve naturally as time goes on.
think anything community driven always ends up evolving to a better version of itself than it's than if it's built on a in a silo or on an island, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point, right? We want to help this out. And
A
that
couple
is
of things that
my
I was going to
presentation.
say
Yeah.
it was one of the questions earlier, but what do you have a short list of courses or resources that you recommend, like a cheat sheet of the, I got 20 hours over the next 6 months to, or month, whatever, do it just some video content. Where should I go first?
I would say Microsoft Learn would be your first one because they cover a lot of this, and especially on those hard skills. Honestly, I would say my normal question is Google. It's a very difficult question to answer because I would say paid courses are normally a lot better because you get instructor time, you get to work with people. Myself and Reed both do training, so come to us if you want to do any. But
And paid, by the way, I'd say to slightly go off of that, it's not just paid recorded videos, but like
yeah,
either a paid course where you actually do an online instruction with them, meaning you still get FaceTime, so to speak, or you go attend a workshop like Marco and Alberto. They tour around the world constantly
yeah,
teaching DAX. And yes, I don't know their exact prices. Let's just say like $1,000 for like a couple days or something. But you also get time to ask them questions. You get to do a lot of hands-on activities, and I feel like you do learn a lot more than just watching a recorded video, free or otherwise. So those in-person ones usually help to increase retention of information, plus allow you to really dive further into some conversations with the experts and instructors who are presenting the information to you.
100%. And yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That's exactly what I meant, and in person and with those instructors. The reason I don't always like saying that though is this isn't available to everyone, right? Some of them could be quite expensive depending where you are based, and maybe your work will cover it, maybe it won't. This is an option for everyone. So really depends on where you are and what resources you have at disposal. If you can find some good ones, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or Reed and ask if you know any good ones. Will help with specifics. Otherwise, Microsoft Learn is always a good start. And honestly, Google, you get a lot of stuff on YouTube which will explain. This is why I've tried to break these out into topics where you can go and just Google each topic and you'll probably learn. And you can put together yourself on a map here.
Exactly. That one is the one that I always wanted to hit. Okay, so there we go. As we are starting to wrap up, yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to drop them in. I think vMix always tells me the number of comments we've had. We're at the ticker is now 122 comments that have been put into the chat. So it was very active today, and I think I saw a peak attendees of about 58 or so. So a good, healthy number. You also do your LinkedIn magic, which helps to get a lot of people into this, which I think what was it? The first time we did this a year and a half ago, we had like 120, 130 people or something into there, which I still think you're second in terms of the most attendees on a single stream. Marco was number one at like 300 the first time he came on.
I think Marco deserves number one.
Yeah, of course. No, but that's still a badge of honor to be second behind Marco, I think, for second most live streams. You and Daniel with Tabular, the announcement of Tabular Editor 3. I think those three videos are my top three, like most viewed and then most rewatched live streams for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Reed, obviously, for putting these on. You always watch them and you have some fantastic topics that come out. So yeah, we're really, really pleased and really thankful for you putting them on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, I think we're on. I'm almost at 100. I'm not quite sure who's going to be my 100th stream, but I feel like I need to do something special for that. Like I did not think I would end up with 100 different live streams that I'm doing. It's basically turned into a podcast almost at this point, but or I guess a video cast, you could call it. But it's crazy that I've managed to get through this many. I thought the well would dry up. Like there can't be that many people and that many topics to present on a weekly basis. Like I'll probably have a big surge, and then I'll do one like once every month or 2 months, like occasionally. But for the most part, by the time I get through my list of people, I've either then had new recommendations, they've come on, and then the people who were on a year ago, like, oh, I have a new topic, I can come back on. So it's not been that challenging to, I guess, keep the ball rolling. I have topics scheduled technically out through end of February already. So like I have a long running list of, which is easy for me. I don't really have to manage that much. And I know I don't have to scramble last minute to go find a presenter because there's just constantly new information about Power BI to talk about. And it makes my Fridays really fun. I like to hang out and I get to learn something for the most part. I come away every single talk learning a bit more. And I'm sure you know this as well, Steve, is it's really hard as a consultant to sometimes set time aside to actually like watch a video or learn. But you know, if I host something, I'm dedicated to like, all right, let me absorb this content while I also get to moderate and help to give this person a voice on a platform.
Exactly. And yeah, 100%. We all learn something, no matter who you are. always take away. I think it's testament to the community. I always say Power BI community out there is one of the most amazing communities. If you're new to it and you're watching this, reach out as well and add people on social media. People are very, very receptive, and there's a whole bunch of people who just love to talk. So absolutely amazing.
And thanks for the links and everything else. I saw you actually even beat me to the punch once and moderated some of the colorful comments that somehow show up into my stream. Maybe that's a badge of honor. My channel's popular enough that I get spam now. So you know, I've updated to the big leagues. Yeah, exactly. My last comment I'll say is at some point I think because of the .pbix that you have for the video on this side, you should have another hat that has another word here, because then it can be that word .pbix, and you can make it into like a sight gag joke.
We'll think about that one.
There you go. Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on, taking time out of your Friday evening for this. It's been great. I'm sure I'll have you back on at some point in the near future. And then I think I will be seeing you probably at least for a little bit in SQL Bits, hopefully then in March.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for those listening as well, definitely look up SQL Bits. It's a chance to meet all of us and lots of other people you've had on presenting. Absolutely awesome fun. So yeah, really looking forward to that one.
Pretty much one of the biggest tech conferences in Europe every year, right?
Yeah, if not
at least related to data.
Yeah, really good fun. A great conference.
Excellent. Yeah, have a great rest of your weekend, and everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you online next week.
Awesome. Yep, thanks everyone, and have a good weekend.
All right, cheers. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.